All right, Nick, what is our show tagline?
We talk to people who know what they're talking about, man.
That's right, Nick. And in that vein, with all the Trump FBI warrants, search of Mar-a-Lago, the DOJ discussion, listen, who can we turn to but one of our experts? He is a friend. He's the Obi-Wan to you and I just being regular Jedis. He's former federal and state prosecutor, CNN legal analyst, host of the Third Degree podcast. We're going to get into that in a second because last week's note to the community was awesome. And he's a Rutgers grad, which is probably why we love him so much. And that is Elie Honig. Elie, Mike, Leon, Nick Saveri, thanks so much again for hopping on the podcast with us.
Mike and Nick, I'm thrilled to be back with you. Love what you guys do, the Rutgers connection. Obi-Wan Kenobi is a good reference.
Thank you.
I'm not sure where he ranks on the Jedi list, though. I mean, Yoda obviously is one. I would say Luke is up there. Anakin is up there. So Obi-Wan may be like the fourth ranked Jedi, but I'll take it.
Okay, all right. Well, if we're going by your rankings, right, it's maybe an insult.
Yoda, man, what are you doing?
I mean, I was going by generic.
Obi-Wan dipped out.
After can I just give you guys a quick sort of name drop?
Always.
You mentioned, or I don't know if you mentioned, but when I did my first book, and my second one's coming out soon in January, but when I did my first book, the only dispute I had with my publisher, with HarperCollins, they sent me the contract. It was great. But it said, we reserve the right to have a professional voice reader do your audiobook. And I said, I want to do it myself. And they said, okay, you can do it. And then when it came time to record it, which I actually did at Rutgers in a recording booth there, before we started, they said, okay, so which professional voice reader do you want to do it? And I said, no, it's in the contract. I'm going to do it. And somebody tweeted and said, are you going to be doing your own audiobook? And I said, yes, I will. You know, it's personal, a lot of first person stories. And Mark Hamill, of course, you guys know, who played Luke Skywalker, jumped into the conversation and said, I believe that every author should read their own book. And it's much better that way, and it's much more authentic. And so I immediately forwarded that to my editor. I was like, Luke Skywalker says I should read my own book, which was great. And he was right, too. I mean, it went so much better because it's personal. You can't have some, even if you had James Earl Jones, it wouldn't have made sense for him to be going, in my first trial as a prosecutor. Right. It's me. It's not, I mean, he's got a great voice. He's a legend, but not that we would have gotten him. But my point is, it's my story, so it should be literally in my voice. But anyway, that made me think of Mark Hamill, Jedi.
I remember, I think I might have shouted out the last time you were on that when I listened to the audiobook when you had done it, it was very conversational. It's personal, but it's like, I'm enjoying this. Like, I'm driving my car somewhere in upstate New York or wherever. I'm like, Ellie's with me, but it's like, to anyone who's an Audible fan or wherever you get your audiobooks from, it's well done.
Yeah,
thank you.
I'm going for the sequel. Hopefully, you're back behind the mic again for that too.
I will be. Well, I'll tell you one of the nicest compliments I got when I was done doing the audio recording after 4 days. It's exhausting. There's a director. There's guys who know how to, like a movie director. And he was in my ear once in a while. He would go, say that last line again. You sped it up or you swallowed a word or whatever. And at the end, he said, well, you definitely wrote this book, meaning like, it's written how you talk, which is always sort of what I strive for, whether I'm on air or with you guys or whatever. So I took that as a nice compliment. So thank you, Nick.
Yeah, well, listen, when the next book comes out, we'll have you back on again because we got the first book over my shoulder for those of you watching on YouTube.
Yeah, it looks good.
Thank you. Elie, let's get into it because the first thing I want to ask you right off the bat, and I don't know if you've mentioned this on other shows that you've been on, I happened to be watching a few weeks ago when the news broke about the FBI executed search warrant at Mar-a-Lago. You were on with Aaron Burnett on Out Front at 7:00. Yeah. So the news was kind of breaking fast, but I want to get your personal take as a former prosecutor that's done this, that's executed that stuff. And you talked about it on the show, but you didn't really give too much of the personal side of it. What were some of your takeaways of not only everything that happened with the FBI executing this, the magnitude of who was involved in it, and then also the backlash that you've seen subsequent from this with everything that's, the vitriol being aimed at FBI agents and the DOJ overall?
So I'll give you guys a little behind the scenes. I was getting ready to go on the show with Aaron on a totally different story. I think it was like the sort of day after the Alex Jones verdict or something. It was a slow news day. I actually didn't think they were even going to use me because I didn't think there was any legal. They said, no, we're going to do this thing on Alex Jones, top of the show, be ready. So I'm in my seat at my studio and 6:54 or 6:55, I'm just sort of mindlessly scrolling Twitter and I see FBI search warrant. What? And at first I thought it was BS or something, but I realized that the person who I saw had tweeted is Caitlin Collins, who's our chief White House. I mean, that's money in the bank. If Caitlin tweets it, it is fact. And so I immediately start texting Erin and her executive producer, are we pivoting to this? And they're like, stand by. And then they're like, yes, hard pivot, all in on this. And we did the whole show on it. But that happens on air sometimes. My first reaction was, holy crap. Search warrants happen all the time, every day. But to do a search warrant where you're going into the private home of the former president is a big deal. And knowing DOJ and knowing Merrick Garland, not personally, but knowing how Merrick Garland operates, he's very careful. He's very reticent, and he wants very carefully to avoid anything that might be political. And so my first thought was, well, wow, in order to get a search warrant, not to get overly law school here, but you have to establish probable cause of a crime to a federal judge. So we knew that happened. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, I mean, that's a big deal. That's not enough to charge, but it's substantial. I then thought, boy, oh boy, I really hope for the good of everybody that Merrick Garland has thought this through and this is sort of a last resort. Because legally, you don't have to show that it's a last resort, but you knew that political backlash was coming. And Mike, you asked about this, and I will tell you, the political backlash was actually more and more intense than I anticipated. Trump weaponized it, and his political supporters jumped right in with him. Now, I think he could have done it much more effectively. I think by putting out nonsense lies about evidence was planted and Joe Biden ordered this, I think you undermine yourself a bit. But he really rallied support, and I think there's still so much unknown as we sit here now. I guess we'll see part of the affidavit tomorrow, which will answer some questions, but certainly not all of them. So it's a big step. But one thing that has come out since that I think has calmed some people's minds, and I think is important to know, is it's not as if DOJ went from zero to search warrant. They negotiated and went back and forth, archives and DOJ, with Trump's people for over a year. Every day, the timeline gets longer and longer. They tried to subpoena. They tried to ask nicely, and they kept on getting some of the documents, but not all. And I think at a certain point, DOJ just said, these are classified documents, some of them highly classified. We can't just have them out there at a beach house, basically. So I think it was smart that DOJ tried all the easy ways before they went with a search warrant.
Elie, I'm going to put you in an uncomfortable situation. In addition to the execution of a warrant at Mar-a-Lago, we know, obviously, and you talked about this recently on your show, what's going on in New York, what's happening in Georgia. You're on Trump's legal team. You're looking at what feels like a multifaceted series of legal battles. What's the one that's keeping you up at night?
Georgia, Fulton County. But there's a big turn that's about to happen here. It looks like Georgia's moving the most quickly now, although Georgia did nothing, that prosecutor, a year and a half to seat a grand jury. And now she's actually sort of paying the price for that, because some of the people she's subpoenaing are political figures. And they're saying, you dragged this out until it was the eve of midterms and the eve of the Georgia governor's election. But she seems dead set on charging. Look, I've questioned her political motivations. She's made mistakes. The DA, she got thrown off one of her cases because she had a political conflict of interest. She had done a fundraiser for the opponent of somebody she subpoenaed. She has done a media tour, which I don't think is smart to do, about a pending case, and has sort of wink, wink, nod, nod, and suggested she's definitely going to charge Trump. She says, oh, I'm not afraid of anybody, that kind of thing. She should not be out doing that. But I think she's the most likely to charge him. However, if they do indict Donald Trump, people need to understand it is miles and miles between an indictment, especially a county level indictment, and a conviction. Not to get overly legalistic here, but the first thing Donald Trump will do if he's charged by a county level prosecutor, which he is, county level elected partisan fundraising prosecutors, he'll go to the federal courts. And he has a very favorable federal courts down there in the 11th Circuit, which is one of the most conservative courts in the country. And he'll say, this violates principles of federalism, meaning the principle that we can't have state and local officials impeding the function of the executive branch and the federal government. He'll say, if every president has to worry that one of the 2,000 plus elected local partisan county DAs might indict him, it's going to really impede the ability of people to function as president. there will be a heated legal argument over that, but I think he's got a fairly good chance, Trump, of getting the case thrown out by the federal courts before he ever even has to worry about a jury. And if he goes to a jury, one of my big criticisms of all the prosecutors here is just how long this has taken. Because at this point, even if they do indict Donald Trump, they're not going to try him. They're not going to be able to try him until realistically 2024. By that point, he could be a candidate. He could be the front runner. He could be a nominee. And everyone goes, well, he's not popular in certain areas of the country. Okay, but you need 12-0. You get one Trump juror and they're going to hang the jury. I mean, everyone says, oh, but jurors will listen to instructions and will follow the law. Sure. But if you're Trump's lawyer, you want Trump jurors on there. And if you're the prosecutor, you don't want Trump voters on there. So I think he could well get indicted. I'm not going to put a percentage on it, but it would not at all surprise me if the DA in Fulton County indicts him. And it would not at all surprise me if that case faces major, major obstacles.
Elie, let's get back to the Mar-a-Lago part of this, because you just mentioned, as we're recording this and this episode is dropping, you're listening to this on Friday, Justice Department was ordered to release the redacted Mar-a-Lago search warrant affidavit. Legal beagle here, break it down. What is the affidavit versus the warrant, the differences of a redacted one and the investigation that's still ongoing? What does this all mean for the people that are listening to this that don't really know the legal jargon behind it?
So by the time this case is over, every person in the United States is going to be an expert on search warrants and how they work. I'm going to make it my goal. There are three key documents here. We've already seen two of them. We saw the search warrant itself, which is 3 pages long. It's mostly a form. The main thing we learned from that is where they wanted to search certain areas of Mar-a-Lago and what crimes they were investigating. Essentially, it's mishandling of defense information, concealment or destruction of government documents, and obstruction of an official proceeding. Then we saw the 3-page receipt for property, which listed in very general terms box of documents, 30-something items. But the big takeaway there was all level of classified materials, including the very top level, which is top secret SCI, which is segmented compartmental information. Those documents are generally public. Those are given to the suspect, in this case, Donald Trump. I shouldn't say the suspect, but the person whose premises are searched on the day of the search. So those documents are generally public. They came out publicly a week or so ago. The affidavit is a different monster entirely. It is the long narrative statement that the prosecutor and the FBI put together to bring to a judge to say, here's our probable cause. It basically lays out the investigation chapter and verse. I've done more of those than I can count. If I had to guess, I mean, we are going to see a redacted version of this tomorrow. I'd say it could be 50, 100 pages, somewhere in there. It is a much bigger, much denser, much more detailed document than the ones we've already seen. Now, what we're going to see when this is unsealed is not the whole affidavit. The judge has said to DOJ, you can redact, you can take out anything relating to identities of witnesses, law enforcement. You can take out anything relating to grand jury materials, meaning any interviews the grand jury's done or any subpoena documents. And you can take out anything relating to your ongoing investigation and your strategy. That's not going to leave a lot. But it will leave us with some interesting things. You know, we're all going to get out our microscopes and magnifying glasses and try to figure out whatever we can from whatever we get tomorrow. But look, it's a lot more. In most cases, the affidavit, virtually every case, the affidavit doesn't come out until after someone's been charged. So Trump is going to get a bit of an advanced look here.
Does that release potentially harm the case in the sense of, you know, with all those redactions, it seems like we're about to play this out now in the court of public opinion. So if what we're seeing, you know, obviously from the standpoint of the media, and obviously a lot of requests went in, if all that comes in and what we're seeing is a pared down version, and not if we are, does that stand any chance of potentially altering the perception that we all have that, you know, obviously when the warrant was executed and, you know, they're going and the FBI goes into Mar-a-Lago, we all have a certain perception of clearly there was enough to, you know, probable cause. But does the affidavit, a redacted version, potentially alter public perception of this case?
It's not going to answer all our questions, but it is going to give us more information. My guess is it's a bit of a Rorschach test. I think people will look at it and find the parts of it that reinforce their views. I suspect people are going to be able to look at people who believe the search was warranted and necessary and say, aha, this shows that it was necessary. I think Trump supporters are going to be able to look at it and say, first of all, it's redacted half to death, I would guess. And they're going to be able to say, as a talking point, Donald Trump wanted this whole thing out, but DOJ and the judge are hiding all this stuff under the black ink from you. I mean, Donald Trump has a political play to make here, which he surely will make. So it's not going to settle anything. It is going to move us towards more information. I mean, I think the one thing that it really will advance for us is the notion that this was a last resort for DOJ, that they tried for over a year. And if anything, I even made this point on CNN, I think it was this morning. You can even ask the question why DOJ was so solicitous, why DOJ was so willing to let him keep these documents, to ask nicely. I mean, at a certain point, these are classified SCI documents. You just go get them. And it took DOJ over a year before they made the decision to do that. So if anything, you might even question DOJ. Why did you take so long?
Let's talk about DOJ for a second. Elie, previously when you were on, one of the questions we talked about was, what's a grade to give Merrick Garland as AG? Again, we did this, a while back, so it was inconclusive, right? And many people, had their respective thoughts about it. Over the past few months, we've seen an expeditious shift, I think it's fair to say, with DOJ and where the AG is. In measuring or looking at where DOJ is now, Garland as an AG, has your perception changed?
A bit, yeah. Here's what I give Merrick Garland very high marks on. He has been credible. He has not lied to the American public. He has been honest. DOJ has not been caught with its hand in the cookie jar. Ordinarily, this is base level stuff, but coming after Bill Barr, who, as I argue in the book, lied to us constantly, this is important, that he has helped to restore DOJ's credibility. I also give Merrick Garland a lot of credit for keeping DOJ independent. He clearly is not taking orders from Joe Biden. He did not coordinate or inform the White House of this search based on what he has said and the White House has said. There's no evidence to the contrary. He is not involving in any way the White House in prosecutorial decisions. In fact, there was a moment when Joe Biden was asked by one of our CNN reporters, do you think that people who defy congressional subpoenas from the January 6th committee should be prosecuted? And Biden said, yes, I do. And DOJ immediately issued a statement saying, we don't take orders about prosecution from anybody. And I thought that was a good move by Merrick Garland. So I give him very high marks on those two things. And those are important. Ordinarily, like I said, they're a given with DOJ and the Attorney General. But after the Bill Barr reign, they were in tatters and needed to be repaired. With respect to his investigation of January 6th, to be sure, he has expanded that, and he has finally shifted his focus from just the low-level rabble who went into the Capitol, which had to be prosecuted, but that was all he was focused on. And his talking point was always, well, we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. And I'm sitting here thinking, that is not how a good prosecutor operates. Yes, you get the guys who went in, but you don't have to wait until you flip the wackos in face paint. You can go right at the White House and right at the advisors. Well, the January 6th committee beat him to it and really put him to shame and seemingly sort of lit a spark. And now he's going back and interviewing a lot of the people who we first learned of through the committee, Cassidy Hutchinson, Pat Cipollone, other Pat Philbin, others like that. So I don't know where Merrick Garland's going to land. I don't know if he's going to charge Donald Trump. I don't know if he's going to charge any of the power players around Donald Trump. I do know this, though. I think it's already too late. I think he has delayed too long. We are now a year and 7 months out plus from January 6th. He's not going to indict anybody before midterms. So we're realistically looking at 2 years plus out from January 6th. And I think when you take that long, you send a message that this is not that urgent. And I think as a practical matter, like I said with Georgia, you're going to have to look at a jury someday. And if you're trying a guy in 2024 while he's on the campaign trail as a nominee or a front runner of one of the two major parties, it makes your task of getting 12-0 for conviction on your jury extraordinarily difficult. And I think Merrick Garland, if he had gone right at the top, like he could, there's no reason he couldn't have indicted this case in September, October of 2021. And everyone goes, oh, but these investigations take time. I know. I did investigations for 14 years. I'm aware of it. This case is very complicated. It is not the most complicated case in U.S. history. There's no reason with the resources of DOJ, if they had been properly directed and gone right at the top in an aggressive manner, there's no reason they couldn't have indicted this thing in 6-7 months.
Speaking of the previous attorney general, there was some news that broke about the Justice Department releasing the unredacted Barr memos detailing the decision not to charge former President Trump with obstructing the Russia probe. And then I started thinking, God, if we could only get somebody on that examined the last attorney general and wrote a
I
book
know.
about it, but I don't know anybody out there that's written. Oh, Elie. Oh, hey, what's going on? Hatchet, man. How Bill Barr.
Paperback.
Now in paperback.
That's right. Now in paperback.
They added the national bestseller tag onto it.
So, Elie, that news that recently just came down, break that down for us and how it feeds into the book that you wrote overall and what Bill Barr actually did with the Justice Department.
Yeah. So basically, the bottom line on this one is Bill Barr lied to the American public, and then he lied about those lies. That's sort of the bottom line of this. So we all remember, I think it feels like ancient history, but I guess it was 2019 when Robert Mueller issued his report. And he had all these findings on obstruction of justice. He laid out 10 different incidences of potential obstruction of justice. 3 or 4 of them were pretty rock solid in terms of being crimes. The others were maybe close to the line. Bill Barr gets that report first. He doesn't let anybody else see it. And he issues this infamous 4-page letter where he completely mischaracterizes the report. Bob Mueller sent him a letter at the time saying, "You've completely mischaracterized my work." Multiple federal judges have since found that Barr lied, distorted about the Mueller report. Okay. So, and that action by Barr is one of the main focus of my book. And I argue because Barr was so dishonest, because he was so manipulative, he really bailed Trump out of the Mueller, any real consequences for obstruction of justice on Mueller. Now, fast forward a couple of years. A public transparency group called CREW, Citizens for, I don't know exactly what they stand for, but an ethics group, files a lawsuit and says, we want any documents, any memos from inside DOJ about this decision to declare that Donald Trump had not committed obstruction. And DOJ says, well, there is a memo, but it's what we call deliberative. And if it's deliberative, you don't get it public. It stays inside DOJ. And the argument that Bill Barr's Justice Department made to the judge was, this was a memo that Bill Barr consulted with, and he was thinking very hard about these legal issues, and it sort of lays out the internal thinking of the Justice Department. Well, the judge saw that memo, the federal judge, and she said, that's not what this is. This is a cover your ass memo. This is a memo that wasn't completed until afterwards. And essentially, she says, it's just a hypothetical exercise, but it was already predetermined that they wouldn't be charging Donald Trump. Now, here's a wrinkle. So the judge says it has to go over to the public, but DOJ has a chance to appeal. But by the time this decision comes down, guess who's Attorney General? Merrick Garland, because enough time had passed. So now Garland's got this decision to make. And you know what Garland did? He appealed it on Barr's behalf. He could have said, nope, no appeal. They got caught with their hands in the cookie jar. They lied to the court. Memo goes out. Garland appealed. And then 2 days ago, the Court of Appeals said, same thing the district court judge said. That's not what this memo is. This is not what Bill Barr tried to tell us it is. This is not a deliberative memo. This is an after the fact, paper the file, CYA memo. And so it comes out. Now, Garland could have appealed again to the Supreme Court, but he finally said enough's enough. And so now we've seen the memo, and that's exactly what it is. It is flimsy. The legal analysis is garbage. And it's a shame that Barr tried to hide it from us, and he tried to hide it from us through dishonesty. And it's a shame that Merrick Garland appealed it, because Merrick Garland should have done the right thing and said, no, they were dishonest about what this letter is. I'm putting it out there. So we can try to delve. I don't know what Merrick Garland's motivation was. Maybe he was trying to not look political or whatever. But it's really a disgraceful moment in DOJ's history, primarily for Barr, but it's also a mark against Merrick Garland.
I feel like every time I listen to Elie Honig or whenever I'm watching him on CNN, I come away so much smarter. And that minor in criminal justice that I had from Rutgers University, I should have made it my major.
He had
should have went to law school.
He had to bring it back up.
I had to bring it back up. We can talk about how I took the LSAT just to challenge my girlfriend at the time. But Elie, you are fantastic. And I want to tease out real quick. No joke. I sent this to Nick. Your last episode and note to the cafe community about A.G. James campaigning off of the Trump stuff. And I encourage people, go download, listen to the Third Degree podcast and that note that Elie sent out to the community, because it was fantastic and really breaks down the analysis of why Trump pled the fifth and why it doesn't matter how many times he pled the fifth in that thing. So go listen to that. CNN senior legal analyst, former federal and state prosecutor, professor at Rutgers. I mean, this guy does everything. Elie, we can't thank you enough for coming on the program. Continued success to you, my friend. Please stay safe.
Thanks, guys. I'm grateful to both of you. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks very much.
Nick, quick break, because our show is presented by the good folks at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Amazing tasting coffee. Look at this. Let me take a... Oh man, I always have a cup of coffee before we record, while we're recording. I can't get enough of this. This is the Colombian Supremo. You are a coffee snob, as the people that watch us and listen to us know. What do you love about the good folks over at Fresh Roasted Coffee and what they're brewing up?
Yeah, I mean, well, first, the fact that you get to learn about coffee. When you go on the website, there's a section just called Learn, and I would recommend anyone go click on it. In addition to learning about the different types of brewing coffee, I'm a French press person myself, but I also have a Chemex as well. So I basically just, everything's sort of a coffee maker we've got here, or different kinds of it. But you also can take a test. So you can find out what is the coffee flavor that's right for you.
Right.
How many places do that? So I go through it. I find that Sumatra's my blend, which I'm ordering, waiting for it to come in. Sampler packs. I love getting variety. So that's how I always start. So I got a pack of 6 that just came recently. Mike, I'm down to my last one. Can't get enough of it.
It's delicious. And right now, for being a Can We Please Talk watcher and listener, you can click on the link below right now. You see that little link that our producer put up right there?
Just right there.
Click on that link, or in our episode details, there'll be a link as well, and get started on some fresh, delicious roasted coffee from the good folks at Fresh Roasted Coffee.